1998 brought us Legionnaire, directed by Peter MacDonald, and stars Jean-Claude Van Damme in a little bit of a different film for him, certainly around that time. These days he's making a little bit more kind of dramatic movies, but in his prime, Van Damme hit out a load of kind of like action movies, and while this one is an action film, it's more of a war film than a hand-to-hand combat film, and there are a couple of sequences within that. So we have here a film which is set in the Roaring Twenties, the 1920s, and Van Damme's character is a guy called Alain, who is a professional boxer, but he is asked to take a dive in a match run by the mafia, which he initially agrees to, but then changes his mind midway through, and obviously at that point is marked for death. He's due to meet his kind of love, who of course is the girlfriend of the mob boss, but things go wrong, and to escape, Alain has to join the French Foreign Legion to try and means of escape. And then the rest of the movie, kind of the last, kind of, well, after the latter hour really, is Alain in the French Foreign Legion in Morocco, having to train initially, meet his comrades, have a little group of friends and some rivalries, but also have a mission where they're having to go and find a fort, go and retake a fort which has been taken over by the local warlord, and the combat that involves that. That will be the basic plot premise for you. Let's talk about what I think works in this movie. This is more of a dramatic role for Van Damme, certainly at this time in his career, and one of the more mature movies, I think, for him. And as I say, much more of a war film than a martial arts film. There are a couple of sequences where he does get into fist fights, but it's more boxing than any type of like martial arts and stuff. So it's a nice change of pace for Van Damme, and I think he does all right here. I mean, Van Damme is certainly in his prime was an actor who had quite the big ego, but it feels like it's toned down a little bit here, and it's a little bit more kind of humble. Although his character is obviously the main hero and the main kind of focus of the film, it is more of a kind of a team effort in some degree. But I've got to say, this is one of the most. It feels big budget, this film. I mean, it was, I believe, a straight-to-video movie, but it feels pretty epic. I mean, I was re-watching this for this review. I was kind of reminded of Indiana Jones films in a lot of ways, where we have these kind of these desert locales, some an out-of-the-way kind of fort in the middle of nowhere. Big, large-scale battles with loads of extras and people on horseback, lots of stunts and things like that, explosions in the sand. It really does give you that kind of epic feel, and obviously, again, it's more of a war film, so it has that elements to it as well. And I think that one of the interesting things about having a movie about the French Foreign Legion is that obviously you have people from all these different countries, so have all these kind of different kind of cultures all kind of like going together as well. I actually really enjoyed his camaraderie between him and these three other guys that he ends up kind of being friends with, and they're all kind of quite different and all have their own kind of motivations and stuff like that. And I enjoyed their little kind of group of friendship. I also quite liked his the relationship with the kind of superiors. I mean, they're built to be somewhat two-dimensional, typical commanding officers who are too strict for their own good in some ways, but nonetheless, I still liked the portrayal there. The action sequences, I think, are fantastic. As I say, the second half of the film really is more or less just kind of like skirmish after skirmish after skirmish, and they're really well done, and a real sense of the devastation of kind of war, especially of that time and stuff like that. I think it was very, very well done, really enjoyable. And one of the interesting things, I think, is that the movie kind of shifts focus on the antagonist, if you like, because initially the antagonist is this mob boss, and he's still kind of ever present to a point. But then once we're in Morocco, which is where this sort of takes place, it's the kind of the local warlord, and the way they're treated are quite good, because they're kind of like, we don't really get much scenes with them outside of the combat scenes, but they're kind of treated as almost sort of a faceless, mystical army almost. And there's some really nice scenes where we have kind of the leader who is just kind of observing the kind of the battles and stuff, and it's quite a good kind of confrontation with Van Damme at the end, and just a little bit of kind of not a fighting confrontation, but just a conversation, which I thought was quite sort of powerful. What don't I like? There are some story elements here that I think don't work. But before that, I mean, this is obviously a movie about the French Foreign Legion, but everyone's speaking English. But I think if this was made today, that wouldn't be the case. You'd probably have people speaking French for the most part, unless they are, foreign and stuff. But so I don't really hold that against it. I think that we weren't quite there in '98 where we wanted that level of realism. Things were made to be an action film first and a kind of a dramatic film second. But I just have to point that out. The main thing for me, there are some story elements that seem superfluous. That the whole gangster setup, I think, is fine for a reason for getting Van Damme's character into the French Foreign Legion. I think we spend a little bit too much time within that period, to be honest with you, because ultimately it's the first act of the film, and it never really comes back again. Now, originally, looking at some information, that there was original plans were to go back and kind of finish that storyline off, but it never does. So that's fine. I think it actually works not going back, but we spend a reasonable amount of time with these gangsters at the beginning, and it feels like having not going back, they could have just cut that down a little bit, and we just needed a reason for him to get in there. The French Foreign Legion, rather than what it feels like it's setting up something which never actually happens. But the main thing I have story-wise, which I have a problem with, is that there's a scene where Van Damme is photographed, and it ends up going in the local newspaper, and the gangster sees it and sends two of his goons to join the French Foreign Legion to try and track him down, and they happen to end up at the same fort as him, which is just. It didn't need to be there. That was like false drama, if you ask me. Like drama unrealistically created, which kind of undercut some of the real drama that was actually happening. Because to be honest with you, it was just written in to kind of give Van Damme's character a kind of a secondary antagonist to a point. Now, what they actually ended up doing with it, I think, was probably the best option that could have happened. But it didn't need to be there in the first place. I think it actually makes the movie a little bit more silly and not quite. You can't take it quite as kind of seriously because of that. Like I said, I can forgive the fact that everyone's kind of speaking English, because that's what just films were like in the kind of the 90s, when if they were dealing with people in a foreign land and stuff like that. So I can forgive that. But this story element adds that level of just silliness, and it's very coincidental that they happen to be there at the same time, and it didn't need to be there. It undercuts the story a little bit, to be honest with you. And I think more could have been done, making the stakes higher with the actual kind of antagonists at hand whilst he's in Morocco. But that's my really only complaint with this film, to be honest with you. I actually think this is a very well made film, and one of Van Damme's more interesting roles. It's one of the better Van Damme films in his whole catalogue, if you ask me. And I think it's because he's reined in a little bit more in this one. I mean, ultimately, he ends up kind of, spoiler alert, I thought, you're seriously the last man standing. I think, that's a little kind of like silly. He's literally the last man standing. So we do have some silly elements that kind of make that little OTT at times, but overall, it's a decent action film. Maybe not quite as realistic as I think it could have been, and quite as dramatic, therefore. But it's still a fun action movie. So somewhat of a kind of unrealistic movie to a point, but an enjoyable one nonetheless. So I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.